Welcome to Crossfire Faith in Gaming. I'm one of your hosts, Russ Dornish, and in today's episode, we'll be exploring the intersection of AI and ethics in the gaming industry. From game design to player experience, AI is playing an increasingly important role in our world. Today, we'll be discussing the potential benefits and drawbacks of using AI and where we see it going in the future. All coming at you next.
Welcome to today's podcast. We have an exciting topic for you. The AI revolution is happening. If you haven't heard of things like ChatGPT or MidJourney or any of the other AI tools out there, AI is transforming our world. Many of you probably have heard of AI through games where you talk about playing against an AI that's either fighting against you very well or perhaps not so well. But today we're going to jump in a little bit to AI, the ethics, the unexpected outcomes, how it's involved in games. But I'm going to actually kick this one, Brian, over to you because you're a programmer, right? So tell us a little bit just about like what is AI?
Oh man, that's a big topic. AI's been around for a while. I mean, it stands for artificial intelligence. It really breaks down into a bunch of different categories. I think a lot of people think of what's in the industry called general AI, which basically means like an AI that sort of thinks and acts kind of like a human and can do a number of different tasks. But AI, like, in industry, in the past, especially, has been sort of limited to particular domains, right? It's been limited in specific areas where it's been used. Games is one of those where we've seen various heuristic AIs and other AI strategies in terms of presenting the player with something that they can play against that's driving the action. And is behaving in a semi-intelligent way, and is often somewhat unpredictable, right? Although I think a lot of people, they think there's more going on than there really is, especially in older games, where AI really just amounts to a bunch of rules that are taking place.
Okay, so I was just going to say, quick AI story. I remember this game forever ago called Chips Challenge. Either one of you ever played Chips Challenge? It's this 2D game. You're in blocks. You kind of go up, down, left, right. And there were different bugs that acted differently. Some of them always followed the wall to their left. Some of them always followed the wall to their right. Some of them were balls that bounced back and forth. And to me, that was the first time I ever saw kind of like enemies having rules and seeing like, okay, this enemy always behaves this way, therefore I know how to compete against it. Is that kind of what we're talking about, getting into AI?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very sort of simplistic version of AI. And I think when we're talking about older games, that's the sort of AI you're talking about, right? You're talking about just something that allows the game, again, to behave in a somewhat intelligent way and seem like it's, there's things going on. There's sort of thinking taking place, if you will. But recently what we've seen, so in terms of AI, historically, we went through what's called the AI winter, where the expectations that we had for AI far outstripped what it could actually do. And for the most part, that was just like the strategies and especially the compute power really held us back in terms of what AI was able to accomplish in the past. But what we've seen recently, in the direction I wanted to go, is that in recent years, like within the past 2 to 3 years mostly, we've seen new forms of AI crop up that can do things that are unexpected. And after having gone through the AI winter, we're now faced with AI that's actually capable of doing some of the things that we were talking about in 60s and 70s computer literature. So It's
So what you're
really a game changer.
so what you're saying, Brian, is that Skynet is inevitable.
Let's hope not. I think that so the early AI literature I think was often positive, right? It looked at AI as something that was really going to do great things, and then we saw later, we saw art around AI, specifically like narratives, movies, and so forth, started to get really dystopian, and we started thinking about broader applications of AI that were harmful or bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So
now we're faced with we don't know the outcome, and I think we're hoping that it's it's better rather than worse. All right, so I think the first place to start on this is the ethics of AI, and how do we use AI in an ethical way? What's fair in terms of AI usage?
well, this has been a question that I have been asking recently now that I've kind of been messing around with ChatGPT and just the ability to like tell it to throw things together, and it puts out this very nicely worded, structured, whatever I want. Like even Dave and I were messing around with it one day, and I was like, "Hey Dave, let's see what it says if we tell it to throw together a sermon," And so my question is, and I'd ask you guys is like, because I know that there are programs that are being programmed now, and like opponent AI that are out there to kind of help combat the use of AI in like schools and things like that. But I'm assuming that nobody in your church, Dave, is going to throw your sermon into a AI to see if Dave is not using ChatGPT for his sermons. So like what when it comes to that, like what are the ethics with this? Like, is it okay that we use this? And you know, uh, I mean, obviously if I use it and I pass it off as my own, that's a lie. And so really I'm just cheating myself in that way. There's not necessarily a way for somebody to find out that I am, but now it also just kind of brings the question about, do we be skeptical? What does that look like? How should we be using AI? What are the
Yeah.
different things? Dave, what are your thoughts?
Well, I have a number of thoughts, and I think some of this comes down to a question. You mentioned copyright, and this is a conversation that's happening all the time in the art world right now, because people are saying, okay, if you generate art with MidJourney, for instance, is an AI art generator. It was one of the first AI things that I interact with that really blew my mind. Somebody told me about it, and I said, okay, well, it's just probably pulling images off the web, and it is referencing those, but it's not. It's generating truly original work. So the question becomes, is prompting it to generate something, is it doing the generating, or is it the tool, like a brush, that the artist is using? And so by the artist choosing to use a different brush, or the artist so for instance, in ChatGPT or in MidJourney, the question is, what prompt are you giving it, and what output are you expecting? And in my mind, the question then becomes, how are you using it in terms of generating large, long-form content and passing that truly as your own? Or I'll tell you the one place that I used it, which was I actually used it for Christmas Eve. I said, I really feel like I want something to explain to people the beauty and the importance of a Christmas carols and lessons service. But I don't have the words right now. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, give me a litany I can use in a United Methodist Christmas Eve service to explain what the carols and lessons service style is that has traditionally been used in Christmas Eve services. And it output something that was very beautifully written, but also kind of referenced a lot of stuff that was out there to bring that all together. So I felt like, for me to pass that off as my own work, was it my own work? Well, I wrote the prompt. I told it what I wanted. And also, I don't think anybody's going to worry about the copyright of this. It wasn't even a litany. It was a description, like write a description of a mouse with 3 heads, and is that a copywritten work? I don't know. So I mean, there's that whole question, I think, on the ethics side, certainly in terms of the ethics from copyright. And Brian, I'd also be fascinated to get into like the moral dilemmas side of AI, where, and I know we're probably not going to go deep into like cars, but the question of, moral dilemmas, if a car has to kill the driver to save the most people around, will it make that decision? Right. And those kind of difficult moral dilemma situations, or like the thing I saw today on a video online, it talked about I think it's called the Mansfield bar on the bottom of a truck, that apparently school buses don't have that bar that's there to prevent people from being terribly injured if they hit the back of the truck. But school buses don't have that. Why? Because it's actually better that the driver be injured and not injure all of the kids on the school bus, or hit the school bus as a relatively light vehicle into the kids in front of it, and instead cause harm to the driver. So that's a moral dilemma and a choice that's been made. We're trusting self-driving cars to make life and death decisions. How do we trust the morals of AI? And is it ethical to use AI? And what is the copyright implication? None of which we're going to solve on this podcast, but they're all challenging things to think about. Ultimately, my question would be, how much do you trust the thing it is that you're using? Whether it's a car or a text generator or an art generator. And what are the potential harms that could come from giving it too much trust? So I'll kick it back to you. Sorry.
I think we'll find that out fairly shortly, because you did see that several of those art companies are suing the AI art generator, because it was found out that it does input specific artist style, and that's how it generates. And so because of that, they're going for copyright infringement on it. So we will find out shortly if it holds up in court or not. If it does, then obviously they'll have to change the way that AI operates. They've already talked about allowing artists to opt out of the ability for their art to be used as reference work within the AI, which I think is a good start. But then the question is, okay, well, every artist should opt out then. So what's the AI going to use at that point? Does the AI company or the AI itself need to pay a royalty or pay, artists a small fee to be on their platform? Because I'm sure a lot of artists would be like, I'm not making any money off my art right now. Sure, give me $100 to use me for this. But I think we'll find that out very shortly of what that's going to look like.
And ultimately, the AI is only good as what it learns and what you teach it, right? So if I say to the AI, propose a utopian society, that's going to be very different depending on what it has learned from where about what a utopian society is. It might, in one instance, output, here's this beautiful libertarian society where each person is on their own and everybody has, there's no big government. And, on the other hand, it says, well, here's big government and socialism. And, depending on what it's learned, whether it's watched, one television station or the other, which then does beg the question of what is it we're feeding it to get the results we get, which is, I think, one of the potential harms. Sorry, go on.
No, that's fine. I think the first test of this is probably going to be the class action lawsuit against Microsoft and GitHub Copilot, which is the AI that Microsoft has created to help programmers generate code. And it was trained against essentially GitHub's entire code base. So GitHub, if you don't know, is, well, it's a number of things, but one of the primary things it is a repository for software developers to store their software and share it. And so essentially GitHub has a lot of code on it. And my understanding is Microsoft has used that entire code base to train this programming tool that people can use to give it prompts and say, hey, write me a program that does X, Y, Z.
And everything on
Microsoft
GitHub
is being
open source,
sued,
right?
No. That's the key. GitHub has what are called private repos as well. So you can have private repositories that are not shared. This is proprietary code used by businesses, and lots of those are businesses that are in the Fortune 500, have their code stored on GitHub. So this is proprietary code, and the issue comes to the license for that code and whether GitHub Copilot, the tool, generates code that's nearly identical to the input. And so there's at least one pretty well documented case where someone had a very specific problem domain. So in other words, they created a program that did something very, very specific, and they were able to use GitHub Copilot to input a prompt that basically gave them exactly the same code that I believe was GPL license. It was not a license that would allow you to just freely use it. And so that's where the lawsuit is coming from, is like, if the output is similar enough. So this is kind of the question that I'm going to pose to you guys. What if, and this is for art and for everything else as well, but is it unethical for the AI if it produces output that's nearly identical to something that an artist created, or that a programmer created, or a writer created?
Well, this to me gets into the question of kind of like the million monkeys in typewriters scenario. But if you were to take that to its logical conclusion and say, if you have a room full of unlimited monkeys and unlimited typewriters, not only would they eventually perhaps produce the entire works of Shakespeare, you may also have at one point where multiple monkeys create the same thing on their typewriter at the same time, unknowing each other. Right? This happens in music all the time just because of the rules of how music is created. This happens sometimes in stories. You see it in other works of art where you say, well, this is really similar to that. I don't know which was created first. One of the first things I asked the ChatGPT to do was to write me a Christmas song. And it wrote, dashing through the snow on a one-horse open sleigh or the fields. And I was like, write me an original Christmas song. At what point does somebody type in something like, write me a Christmas song, and it produces something and they go, this is great, I'm going to record it. Well, too bad, you're just recording a copyrighted work. So, I mean, that's, I think, a major challenge with that kind of stuff. Like, what if I went to the repository you talked about and said, write me a piece of software that could execute a trade in the instance where such and such stock falls below such, and before you know it, I've just actually regenerated some bank's code that's running on their server that's a block away from Wall Street to make some AI trade that, they've spent millions of dollars developing this AI trading thing. And I just had an AI write it for me because it was trained on that repository. I don't know. That's deep. Russ?
I mean, I can't say better than that. I mean, I just want to keep going at that. I mean,
yeah. Well, and
right.
I think that I was going to say, to the art piece, right? The other question, like I said before, is what is it learning? So if it's learning based on, it says, create me art that looks like Jackson Pollock. And if it just recreates a Jackson Pollock painting because that's what it knows, I would hope eventually we get to the point where it's creative enough where, much in the same way that if I were to tell you, create a Jackson Pollock painting, you go in your mind, you think about every Jackson Pollock painting you've ever seen. You know some rules you learned in art class about what makes a Jackson Pollock a Jackson Pollock. Okay, we're going to do an Andy Warhol, tomato soup cans. And you know what Andy Warhol's art looks like. So you create something very, very similar. Does that mean that you've ripped off Andy Warhol, or are you creating something in his style?
And that goes back to the whole idea of, nothing's original ever. Nothing's original in the world at this point. Like, everything has some aspect of something else within it and used within it. And so then the idea is, okay, so can anything really truly be a copy then at that point? Because you're always taking, little bits and pieces or aspects or themes from other people that have created. So you can get quite deep with this, and I don't know if we can ever.
Well,
there's obvious answers to it, but
yeah, let me see if I can take us into the next topic, which is the question of perhaps intent, right? So, like, if it's my intent to emulate, one of the AI generated things I saw was create a street art of Snoop Dogg in the style of Basquiat. It was really good. Like, it looked so good, but it was clearly not attempting to be a Basquiat painting, right? It was imitating a style, or, you could even say at some point a parody. So if I put on a deep fake face and pretend to be Tom Cruise because I'm making a funny video about Tom Cruise, or Weird Al makes a song in the style of Coolio because he's parodying Coolio, that's okay. But he can't get up there and say, hello, my name is Coolio, and start singing Coolio's song. So, some of the stuff out there, like the deep fake face stuff or the voices, I feel like, okay, if I were to use it to try to like pretend to be SpongeBob, that'd be funny. But if I use it to create a video that makes it look like I'm Barack Obama and I say something he didn't say and post it claiming that it was really him, then I've crossed the line. But that line is so hard to define that the question is, do we dare tiptoe? And once Pandora's box of that particular AI software is available, you can't put it back in the box.
Yeah, there's even deeper implications too. I'm thinking of a book by Heinlein called "The Moon is a Harsh Mistress," where an AI is able to create a person who never existed, and it is able to essentially be that person to everyone. In other words, it can broadcast a face and a voice, and not only could it imitate anyone it wanted to, but it can also just make up a person from whole cloth. And that book has, if you haven't read it, you should read it. It's quite interesting. But again, that casts back, that book is, relatively old. And it casts back to the way we were thinking about AI before we sort of ran into an AI roadblock. And I think some of those stories are going to be useful in terms of, we need to start thinking as a society about the implications of really powerful AIs.
Well, and not that we can create real people yet, but have you seen the Unreal MetaHuman stuff?
Mm-mm.
Oh my gosh. Well, I feel like I thought we had talked about it before. Just Google AI or Epic Unreal MetaHuman. Okay, so I'm going to pull it over here just really quick onto the thing. I'm going to show everybody on the podcast. This is what I'm talking about. If you go Google Unreal MetaHuman, they have created these fake people that through, I don't know if they're AI generated or if they're, humans generate them, but these are just 3D models that are not real people, but in the videos, they are indistinguishable from real people. I mean, we are now to that point where it is, I would have to go pixel peeping on eyelashes to see if, are these real eyelashes or, is that real skin? Are there pores? Does this person have zits? I don't know. So we're already at that point fingers? Where, right. Like, was that a Gattaca reference that you just
no,
made?
It's,
okay.
No,
have you seen Gattaca?
AI, I have not, but AI, some of these AI images, like when AI is generating pictures of humans, fingers are like a well-known issue currently. I'm sure that won't stay that way, but
it's getting better.
We see a lot of images where like there's just weird stuff going on with hands that like the AI doesn't understand, like how hands work.
I thought you were referencing Gattaca at one point in the film. They talk about this person who's playing the piano with 12 fingers. And of course everybody is like biologically perfect, but this person was born with 12 fingers. And the comment is, well, that piece that they played can only be played with 12. Anyway, so the question becomes, right, what are, and I think overall, like, what are the benefits and what are the possible worst outcomes?
Oh man, we should not go into the worst outcomes.
Well, I'm thinking, okay, so what if Vladimir Putin dies, but he's replaced only in video by AI videos and AI generated voices and is telling people to do things and they think it's him because they have no reason not to trust it. I mean, I was thinking these things back when we were in COVID. I mean, not that I thought that they were happening, but I thought, gosh, if we get to the point where everybody's doing everything over video, then how do you know if the person on the other side of the call is really there, or is really themselves? At one point, just to run an experiment based on a video that I had seen, I actually attended an entire Zoom call entirely using a pre-recorded version of myself that just sat there, nodded, blinked. I took that recording. I put it in OBS. I used it as a virtual cam. I pulled the virtual cam into Zoom. Nobody knew. So I could have had an assistant run the video of me during the Zoom call and take notes while I could have been in the Bahamas, I wasn't. I was just on a conference call, but
yeah, it's
again,
interesting.
It comes down to trust.
Right. It's interesting again to call back to some of the ways we were thinking about AI in the early going. A lot of people are probably familiar with the Turing test, which is this idea of like it's a computer science concept of, hey, I've got a person in a room and I've got maybe a person in another room. And the test, the idea is like, hey, what if I put a computer in this room that's actually talking to you? Can the human that's in this room, can they tell the difference just from the text output of the computer? Can they tell the difference between whether there's a human in that room and a computer in that room? And what's interesting, now that we have AI that's really good at generating natural language, there's some debate now as to whether that test, I think, as computer scientists, we always thought, oh yeah, this test makes total sense as to whether, we've really generated an AI or like whether this thing qualifies as an AI or not. But now that we have things that do generate output that's really just, exactly or very, very close to what a human would generate, now we're like, well, maybe that test isn't, maybe it isn't that useful, or maybe it really doesn't tell us whether this is AI. The line of whether something is an AI feels like it's always moving.
Well, and we're already having these interactions all the time with, I tried to sell something on Facebook Marketplace the other day. I got a response that was, I'm very interested. I'd like to give you money right now. And I'm like, okay, how's your weekend going? Good. Please give me money right now. Click here, or something like that. And then I'm like, are you a person? Yes, I am a person. Please give me money now. It's like, like, I don't know. Are you a person in some other country who's just trying to scam me? Or like, are you an AI? And there's probably this fine line between in the Venn diagram of poor interpretation of languages versus well implemented AIs, that there's probably a blurring.
It's funny.
This feels like I got a quick little story. This feels like the park ranger dilemma that we hear about, whereas it turns out that the overlap between the smartest human or the dumbest human and the smartest bear is like pretty tough in terms of, getting into the trash and so on. It's, there's some pretty smart bears, and then, people actually need to be able to use the trash receptacle. So it can't be like too complicated or people can't use it. Anyway, sorry. I totally destroyed that joke, but I'll let you go, Russ. I'll let you go on.
Well, I was going to say that brings up, of course, the classic movie Blade Runner and the testing that is used in that to determine who is technically, rogue AI and who's actually human, and the questions that come up with that. But maybe that's the direction we're going in as society. We're gonna have to start thinking about ways to trick AI to be able to out itself, I guess, to things. Because again, it goes back to our original topic, which was the idea of copyright and all that. Of how are we going to figure out that all this is happening as we become more and more? I mean, it's getting to the point where again, ChatGPT is a very powerful tool that offers a lot of stuff, but also offers a lot of dilemma in society. And you know, we're we're definitely going to be going down that road and in that direction.
Well, and
All right, so I'm gonna
go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave. Go ahead, and then I'll launch the next thing.
I was gonna go into the next thing, but you go ahead and go into it.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna propose one more deep topic, and then I think we'll try and ground this at the end with we'll actually try and bring this back into games. But the next thing I wanted to talk about was unexpected outcomes of AI. And I wanted to talk a little bit about long haul trucking versus art. And so I think you both have seen this on the document. You're probably wondering what I'm talking about here. So there's been a lot of talk about self-driving cars and the implications to the transportation industry, right? Specifically long-haul trucking, right, which employs a lot of people. We have a lot of truckers out there who that's their job, and it pays reasonably well here in the US. And the early talk, a lot of the early talk that I saw about AI taking people's jobs was in this specific area, long haul trucking, right? Oh man, what's going to happen? All of a sudden, all the truckers and taxi drivers are going to be out of a job. What's going to happen? This is going to overturn our entire society. And what's been interesting to me has been that actually that's been a lot slower to happen than I think a lot of people would have thought, right? It turns out that driving a car, or especially a big truck, is really hard, and there's a lot of edge cases. There's a recent video, if you want to go look it up, about Tesla, their full self-driving thing, trying to drive in the snow and doing a hilariously bad job, because snow's hard to drive in, guys. And it turned, it hasn't probably been trained a lot in terms of driving in snow, but it's really bad at it. It has trouble even though, even under regular, more normal or dry driving conditions as well. And there was a lot of talk about, especially from Elon Musk about yeah, it's coming. It's right around the corner. We've just about got this problem solved. And it seems like every time that we think that, there's a new problem, and it's a very tough problem to crack. Whereas we've seen these other implementations of AI, right? You've mentioned ChatGPT, Russ, and we've talked about MidJourney and some of the other art generators, and they're surprisingly good, right? I mean, all of a sudden they're generating stuff that's hey, this is not bad, right? And so that's what I'm talking about in terms of unexpected outcomes of AI. And I think that's going to continue to happen, that we're going to see AI be amazing at some things that we didn't expect. And then other things that we thought, oh yeah, AI is going to be able to do this, no problem. It actually turns out to be a lot harder than we thought. But I don't know if you guys have anywhere to go from there, but I'll throw it out and see what you got.
I've got a ton of places. Go ahead, Russ.
When it comes to that and what you're saying too, I wonder if some of our expectations just come from again, going back, 20, 30 years, where are we supposed to be in the future? So, our thoughts are, well, we're going to have housemaids, and we're going to have, robotic housemaids, or, thinking the Jetsons and things like that, of the future that we had projected out long ago. I wonder if that's kind of where some of those expectations come from. And the reason why we get unexpected outcomes when it comes to AIs is because it's things that we didn't think about of like, oh, an AI can do that and do it really well, i.e. generating art for you, i.e. Being a brainstormer, honestly. Like I see ChatGPT, like Dave said, my wife has done the same thing where she was like, having writer's block. And she was just like, I have no idea. Here's my topic this week. And I have no idea where to begin. And I'm like, okay, throw it in the ChatGPT. Say, hey, give me an outline, at least to get me going, get the juices flowing, get ideas going. And then I'll do my thing. And, it's able to do that. Did we ever think that that was what AI was going to be used for? No, that's not in the terms of what we probably would call it sexy in the AI world, or it's like, yeah, that's what we want AI. Because could you think 20 years ago, like in science fiction movies, like that you're watching Back to the Future, they go to the future, they're like, oh yeah, we got AI and it tells us, it does art for us and it tells us what we should write about. It's like, that wouldn't be cool in a movie. What would be cool is self-driving cars or the automated, car that gets you from point A to point B on like a transit system, because all the cars are on a grid, like Artificial Intelligence, the movie, or heck, all of Arnold Schwarzenegger's like futuristic movies, like gosh, I can't even put the names right now, but the one where you get, well, that one, yes, but I'm talking about some of his more obscure ones. You guys remember the movie with Arnold where they have clones and you can get cloned, and then at one point, like, he passes out, wakes up, goes home, and he sees himself living his life, and it's because he was replaced by a clone, but then you don't know who's the clone and there's no way to tell. Just saying, like, that movie has like automated cars and all of these crazy AI things that you can do with it, and it's like, that was all expected because that's what we thought of the future, but that's really not where we're at. I mean, we don't have flying cars. We don't have mass transit systems, connected via AI. We're a lot more behind than our past selves would like to say.
So I had to look it up. Is it the sixth day? Is that what you're talking about?
Maybe. I think, yeah. I remember the poster.
Okay.
I'll look it up and see if I'll confirm.
Okay. Well, so I think there's a couple things going on here. Number one, I think, is there's always the like you said, the sexy thing that is, the dream thing we want, right? AI self-driving cars. Wouldn't that be amazing as a convenience? But then there's the, same thing like with robotics. You think, gosh, robots would be so cool if they could, carry gear on the battlefield or, whatever. What do robots do? We use them for surgery. And we use them to weld cars on the production line. And we use them to defuse bombs, which is cool. But I think the other thing is the question of what's at risk, right? So like the self-driving car thing fascinates me to no end because not only what we talked about earlier, the ethics of it, but also the fault tolerance. Here's the crazy thing. We would rather have people drive cars where 5% of the people driving cars get in fatal accidents than have self-driving cars where even one kills someone. Right? So statistically speaking, what I've seen, and maybe I'm wrong, there's probably new studies out there, somebody's going to correct me. Statistically speaking, I think self-driving cars are actually safer than people-driven cars. The problem is, if even one causes a death, we are not willing to tolerate that. On the flip side, ChatGPT, MidJourney, like, meh. There might be some copyright issues, but like nobody's dying because of MidJourney art. Nobody's losing their life because you're not going to ChatGPT, like, write me a ransom note. like, and quite frankly, even if you did, like, I think at one point my kids were like, oh, wouldn't it be cool? Like, let's ask it for a plot of a movie with like bank robbers or something like that. And it was like, I can't generate like violent content or something like that. So I was like, okay, so there's some limit, right? There's some boundaries. But I do think it's a question of what's at stake and what are we willing to tolerate when it comes to our AI. It's very easy to say, I'm going to tolerate an AI in a video game that may act a certain way, may give me some benefit, may give me some sort of edge, or may just make the game more interesting to play. totally different when you're talking about long haul trucking, possibly either people losing their jobs or, long haul trucking. And suddenly this tanker truck full of fuel drives into, a pile up on the freeway because it thinks it's going to save 40 kids in a school bus. Come to find out the school bus was empty.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a great point, David.
So
All right.
what
Should
about
we
video
move
games?
on? Yeah. Let's round this.
I mean, the big thing with video games that we can see is I think it has been the evolution of AI in video games. Like video games are becoming more and more realistic. They're becoming more and more applicable and honestly, in my opinion, enjoyable. And a lot of that has to do with the AI that developers are able to write. And we are about to see, by the way, a complete revolution when it comes to AI in video games with things like Unreal Engine 5. The things that system has already built into it is going to shorten development times. It's going to create more and more complex games. It's going to create prettier games overall. It's going to bring all these different things to us that I think we aren't prepared for. Everybody's been waiting, I think, for the next gen of games. Let's be honest. Like, some games have been gorgeous. Some games have been really good looking. I don't feel like we've had yet that game that really blows you away as far as like, this game is 100% next gen. It's what I expected. I have a feeling that one of the biggest aspects to when we really hit that is going to be AI in video games. I think getting it to the point where your NPC characters, your enemies are extremely smart, extremely knowledgeable, know what they're doing, know what they need to do, gives you that really real experience, almost too real maybe. I'm wondering, how the difficulty level is going to get on games when we get to that point. But I'm very interested to see where we go from as far as games go with the evolution of AI that I feel is coming and coming very soon. We're months away from that to start. I don't even remember, Dave. Do you know what the first like games that'll be on Unreal 5 are? We've only had Unreal
Fortnite
5 for less
is already
than a year.
on Unreal 5, isn't it?
It might just be though for like a
it doesn't look
upgrade.
cinematic, but
it's not.
I'm pretty sure it's on.
My point is, it's not a fully developed game for Unreal 5. They just ported it over, which is going to get you some of the better features, but it's not an Unreal 5 game. I'm talking about the first fully developed game for Unreal 5 and when we might expect to see those. Because again, that came out what?
I just want to play the demo. That demo that came out, I was like, let me fly around in that thing. Well, and I guess you could say, is it UE5? Is the Matrix demo?
Yeah, that was the official first
a demo,
taste.
but
boy, was that insane. Yeah. Like, that's what I'm saying is as we are moving into this, like, we are going to see some crazy stuff.
Right. And that mostly to me is more graphical. And I'm curious, Brian, maybe you know this answer. Cause I don't remember, like, I'm thinking way back for a second into AI versus people history. Like are there, how's the AI versus people chess match going? Like, does AI always win now? Do people sometimes win?
I was actually thinking about this the other day, and I don't know the answer, but the way that AI sort of won the chess war was really more of a brute force. It's not the kind of AIs that we're really grappling with now, these ChatGPTs and so on. And I would be curious if we built a chess AI using these techniques, these sort of machine learning techniques. I wonder if that would be able to quickly be as good or surpass what we saw with like Deep Blue versus Kasparov, right?
Right.
So
like Deep Blue versus ChatGPT. I'd be like, dear ChatGPT, I have a pawn at A1, like, or whatever. And just describe the whole board. Where should I move? I'm sure somebody out there is probably already doing this.
I think actually machine learning probably would be good at that, right? It's really good at pattern matching.
Yeah.
Or
would it end up deciding that the best route it could take was a brute force attack? because at the end of the day, it comes down to numbers and
build a
odds
Deep
and,
Blue style AI with
right. Like your AI would just build it would build its own AI.
So I was about to say,
filling hard drives.
I just looked up some of the AI information within Unreal Engine 5. And for instance, this is something I didn't even think about. Again, going to the unexpected that we were just talking about, there is an AI plugin for Unreal Engine 5 that can recreate and generate a copy of the world within Unreal Engine 5.
Wow.
So like, I'm not even thinking about the art aspect. Like, so what this could possibly do, again, because we talked about this, and I said this just a moment ago, it is going to lower the cost of games severely. And by that, I mean, we have gotten to the point where games are ballooning in prices. It costs a lot to develop a game. We have lost what I like to call those B level or single A level games. Like we have indies, right. But you guys remember like back in like the 2000s, the 90s, the 2000s, you had those B level, like just one-off games. They weren't great, but they weren't bad. They were just existed to kind of fill the void throughout the year as you waited for the really big titles. I'm wondering if because of the tools that an Unreal Engine 5 brings and the ability to just plug it in, like I've listed it and I've been looking, they have, easy AI simulators for animals that you just pop in. You push a button and it's going to load their AI into what an animal is supposed to act. So all of this could be done by one person. They could create a simple middle of the road game and release it for $20 and see how it does without, as much of a sweat. So I didn't even think about that.
I want to make an analogy and a prediction because of that. The analogy is to photography. Okay. Yep. For a long time in photography, the biggest difference between professionals and amateurs had to do with equipment, right? If you didn't have the right equipment, you could not go out and be a professional photographer. And over time, we've gotten to the point now where your iPhone takes better pictures than the best digital cameras 10 years ago. And yet, what we're seeing is because the level of acceptable has come up and become so easy and become so accessible, that means that to be a professional, you have to actually have a good eye. So I'm hopeful that by bringing these tools that bring the level of acceptable up so it's so easy to attain acceptable graphics, acceptable AI, etc., that we'll probably have a ton of terrible games because people are like, oh man, I've got this awesome tool. The same way you had a ton of photographers that said, man, I went out and bought the greatest camera and then their photographs were still crap. But we're going to see people that start doing that. And then the response, I think, is going to be, we're actually going to have a resurgence of great story and great characters because that's what will be necessary to rise above the noise.
Definitely. And I think we'll see that from the big boys, like the normal teams out there that are putting together massive games. They'll be able to continue that stuff. But I just meant, seeing kind of those middle of the tier games that don't need all that. That's just kind of a filler. One thing I want to point out. So this is what it says here on UE5's website. New features in UE5 give you the ability to create more believable AI agents than ever before. Mass Entity provides a framework for data-oriented calculations that can be used where performance is key, including the simulations of tens of thousands of AI agents in a single scene. In addition, there are smart objects, a collection of objects placed in a level that AI agents and players can interact with. This system is easily configurable and can add an unprecedented level of interactivity to your scenes. That's just some of the stuff that they have going on. So again, think about that with like the ability to do tens of thousands of AI generated humans in a setting. You know what game I'm thinking of right off the top of my head? I'm thinking of Grand Theft Auto 6. And the idea that, you're going to have a fully living, breathing world going on around you without the kind of repetitiveness that you sometimes see, where if you play a game long enough, you're going to see the same AI over. You're going to see the same NPC characters. You're going to see them doing the same actions over and over. This is going to be completely like a real world that you can play in and do whatever you want. So again, I think this is going to be a huge step towards the future, and we're only seeing a small tidbit of it in the different AI applications that we have available to us as far as gaming goes. The the future is looking extremely bright.
And I think AI is a great benefit for single player narrative games. But I think where it can be problematic is if AI were to like get into multiplayer games, the bots, which can be problematic. Although I know like the question we have in the document talking about bots in Fortnite. I remember my daughter's first time loading into Fortnite and she was so excited that she had won Battle Royale. And I thought, you're 7. Like, how did you... And then I read that, the very first time you drop in, it's 100% bots you're playing against. So, there's bots that might make the player feel better and be good for training. There's bots that make the worlds more interesting and more believable. But then there's also the potential for bots that could cause harm or could infiltrate, So I think there is the good, bad, ugly all around that is challenging for the future. And I don't know that we're going to solve it today, but I just realized we're getting deep into the 50 minutes here, and we might have to wrap this up and continue this. Maybe we do a follow-up in like a year or two and say, here's what we thought before AI took over the world. Bring us home.
I want to drop a couple more. Yeah, I want to drop a couple more grounded questions in here that maybe we can cover really quickly, and then I think we'll wrap up here. But David, you were just touching on bots in Fortnite, and you and I both play Rocket League. And one of the things that has come up recently in Rocket League is the infiltration of a new AI bot that has been showing up in ranked play. And the bot is really good. It's definitely better than you and me.
Well, that's not.
And so now it's trouble. Now the whole community is trying to grapple with this bot that's really good at Rocket League. So I don't know what the outcome of this will be, but I do not think this will be the last game that we see all of a sudden AIs showing up in ranked play. I think this is just the first shot across the bow.
The big thing that I'll say is we're kind of already experiencing that anyway with cheating and the different AI like cheat codes and things that you can, aim bots. Things like that. So the gaming industry has been dealing with it already for a number of years. And I think, they're starting to implement things to combat that. I think we'll see that more and more. For me, I'm like, really, what does it give you? Like, yeah, I climb up the ranks and I'm like a top ranked player. But if I get invited to some like invitational as a result, I'm not going to be able to load that bot in and play live using that bot. So like, go for it, use it, climb the leaderboards, get that digital gold medal that means absolutely nothing. I will stick to my single player games, Brian, and I will enjoy them. And when I go out into the world of multiplayer every now and then, like I do, I will still lose whether I'm playing a bot or a human. And that's all that I care about. But for me, it's like, yeah, you're not going to get anything out of it, actually. So, if people want to take the time to do that and not play the game, that's on them for like not getting to enjoy the actual part of playing the video game and having something else do it.
Yeah, I think it'd be neat for the ability to, let's say you just put one of them in and you say, look, y'all are out there, you got, 99 humans and one bot, see how you do. If it was obvious that it was a bot and not somebody masquerading as a bot. I also think it'd be neat so somebody who's really, really good could train against something else that's really, really, really good. There are certain games where you go, all right, I'm going to do the training mode. And you're like, well, this is just way too easy. This is nothing like playing against real players online. I know, like, I played The Division, and man, I was great at The Division. And then I went into the place with other people online, and I got slaughtered. It was like, oh, this is not even close.
Yeah, it's a great point, David. Two things off of that. I think this opens up the possibility of bots being trained at specific levels. So, like, for instance, if you could play offline in Rocket League and like train against if you were a bronze player and you just trained against a silver bot in, say, 1v1, that would really be helpful for you to just like, hey, I don't have the pressure of ranked, but I can just play something that matches the way people play
in
a specific rank. Yeah. That's cool. And then the other thing is, if you're at the very, very top end, I know this is an issue for like Rocket League pros, right? Where there's just not many people at the level that they're at. And so it can be tough at times for them to find an opponent or other players who are at their level so that they can continue to get better, because there simply just aren't a lot of people in that 1% of 1% to play against.
I was about to say, so there was something similar to this back in 2005. So probably one of the best sports games of all time, NFL 2K5. It had what was called VIP profiles. And the VIP profile actually tracked everything that you did in the game. It tracked how much you ran the ball. It tracked how much you threw the ball, who your favorite receiver was, how did you run it tracked everything that you did. And it created a profile that your friends could then play in offline games. It was so cool that they even had celebrities create their own VIP profiles, and they had a tournament that you were able to play all of these celebrities, and they had them record lines. Like, this is 2005 in a video game, by the way. Wow. So, like, they already did something very similar to that. I can only imagine with today's AIs what you would be able to do as far as tendencies go. And think of them creating like a top 100 list for Rocket League, and then you being able to select who on the top 100 you play against. Or you could create a team of the top 100, and then, you and Dave could just, constantly be practicing against them to get better and to try and hopefully beat them. Like, that's an awesome, idea going forward for the future. Somebody, copyrighted. We're copyrighting right now. Crossfire copyright. AI trainers in online games. We just copyrighted it. That this is our whole thing. We're submitting it. And
Russ, I don't know if we can copyright AI ideas.
We can. We just did it, Dave. We just did it. It's called Crossfire Bot. It's going to be a trainer in all online multiplayer games.
We actually have a Crossfire Bot in our Discord. I think it just welcomes people when they join, but
yeah, it's not very smart.
It's not very smart.
All right. Well, last grounded question, and then I think we'll close.
Yep.
Russ kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but I was thinking specifically when he was talking about difficult AI opponents. We have seen some things like this in the past in some games, and I'm wondering if we're going to see more of it. I'm thinking specifically of, there's a roguelike called Smart Kobold that has a very intelligent AI, and probably one that more people are familiar with would be the Shadows of Mordor games that had the Nemesis system. And I'm wondering if you guys think that we're going to see a lot more of that.
We should. I don't know why we haven't. That's the best part about that game. The Nemesis system was the coolest thing ever, which, by the way, if you want to hear a really quick short story on the Nemesis system and Shadow of Mordor were originally supposed to be implemented into a Batman game. Because again, WB, they were all sharing with Rocksteady and Arkham games. So originally the Nemesis system was created to eventually be implemented into a Batman game, which makes sense, because you have thugs and you have your villains and you have all that stuff. I am shocked that nothing has used the Nemesis system since. What are we doing? That was one of the coolest implementations and coolest gameplay mechanics. I absolutely believe we should see it again, and I hope we do. I haven't heard anything about it since the last game didn't do so well as far as, the Shadow of War game. Mostly because of the controversy with loot boxes. But, I mean, that was such a cool gameplay mechanic. I recommend everybody go check out Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War because the Nemesis was just such a cool aspect to it that really made that game that much more fun than what it would have been without it.
Well, and it wouldn't surprise me to see developers taking things like AI, ChatGPT, and MidJourney style. Who's the person out there that's having the seed of an idea right now that we're going to see in production 5 to 10 years from now coming out on the shelves where, you know, I'm thinking like the games like Stardew Valley, right? Where like half of the game is like relationship simulation and, you know, oh, well, this person likes cake and that person likes plants. And so but what if that was all a much more intricate AI doing that because it's hooked up to some sort of machine learning cloud-based thing? So I think it'll be fascinating to see how this changes the enemies in games, the friends in games, the teammates in games, or, you know, how you play the game yourself because of whatever input goes into it. So I think where we saw games go procedurally generated, there will be a new future, you know, AI revolution of how games integrate AI in multiple ways.
Yeah, imagine if you played, you know, an RPG where the lines were never repeated, right? And the characters still said things that make sense, but, you know, you didn't get the constant, like, same line over and over again of, like, I have nothing left to say to you, right? Instead, the character would continue to tell you things. And you could just, like, play the game
in
just
the voice of the voice actor. Because you can generate voices.
Maybe.
Just think about this, though. Like, think of all the games that have choices and have different branching paths, you know, Quantic Dreams games. Can you imagine if we get to the point where AI is smart enough where you'll get like 10 different options and it could lead to a multitude of different, like actually affecting the ending? I like to say that all the games out there that have quote unquote like different endings based on the choices you make. Yes, but there's a limited amount of like 4 or 5, you know, different endings that you can get to. There's never that true feeling of like, I completely was in control of my story. That was Russ's story. That was Brian's story. That's something that would be just unimaginable.
And yet, I wonder if there's too much possibility. I'm thinking Minecraft and or No Man's Sky, if the infinite possibilities become meaningless, because in No Man's Sky, I could go into billions of galaxies or whatever it is, and yet I don't know if it's that interesting. In some ways, the potential thousands of worlds in Starfield sounds a little bit more interesting than the nearly infinite worlds in No Man's Sky. I don't know, but similar to this conversation, if we just go on forever, then, you know, maybe people will lose interest.
They probably already have.
I'm going to drop one last thing in here.
What's that?
I'm going to drop one last reference in here.
Go for it.
In terms of, you know, infinite narrative, there is a thing out there called AI Dungeon that you can go play. It is a infinitely generated text adventure powered by deep learning. So if you're interested in this idea of what if I had an AI that just made up the narrative as I go, that thing already exists. It's maybe not as good as you want it to be, but it does exist. So
fascinating.
Maybe check that out too.
Okay. Excellent. Well, I want to just wrap us up by saying this has been fascinating and fun, and I've loved every minute of this. If you want to have conversations like this with us, jump onto our Discord, not just the three of us, but, you know, there's a ton of people that join us on Discord every week, Monday nights at 8:30 Mountain Time. So go check out our Discord at discord.crossfirecast.com. Find us on Patreon. We're Patreon Church for Gamers. You can find all of our links on our social media, and I think usually I link them down below in the comments. So just thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Whichever medium you participated in, we're glad that you're here. So as always, we appreciate you, and God bless.